Hello again. Welcome to the Bernie Show on STL Sports Central, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. As always, I am Bernie Miklas, and I've been writing and talking about St. Louis area sports, including colleges, since 1985. Here at STL Sports Central, I do 5 videos a week and write 5 columns each week. And I also join my friend Randy Carricker on his daily morning show once per week. And I'll tell you about some other stuff too at another point. But I want to get to it. I got a lot to say today, and I don't want to drone on too long, right? Today's topic. In hiring Chaim Bloom, Cardinals chairman Bill DeWitt Jr. has gone back to his roots, back to worked wonderfully for him in the past. And this is a wonderful thing and an encouraging thing for St. Louis Cardinals baseball and Cardinal fans. Now that Bloom is officially seated as the team's new president of baseball operations, Cardinals can move forward by getting started on an overdue rebuild and a belated plan to modernize and update what had become a really stale, stagnant model. Okay, everybody wants to put a timetable on this. I'm not going to. I want to see how it plays out. What's the point of putting a timetable on this? Because sometimes young players can develop, better and faster and sooner than expected. Sometimes you make a trade that doesn't look like a big deal at the time, but maybe in a year and a half, all of a sudden you're like, wow, we got a hell of a player here. That kind of, there's no point in putting a timetable on it because we don't know exactly every move that will be made. So let's just monitor it and see how it goes. But I do have confidence in the way Chaim Bloom is going to go about it. And yes, it is a rebuild, even if they don't want to call it that. Will the Cardinals win at a high level right away? Well, of course not. It doesn't mean they're going to be garbage. I do believe they'll be able. Yeah, look, if you can win 78 games with this team in 2025, I can't imagine that next year's team would have a lot less talent. Maybe so. Again, here I am violating my own rule because I don't know who they're going to trade away. So what's the point in trying to speculate of what the record will be? Shame on me for even doing it because it's stupid. Are we going to see them in the hunt for a National League pennant a couple years from now? I doubt it. Listen, I'm pragmatic about this. I'm also patient about this. I'm not in a rush to hurry into anything and to see Chaim Bloom make stupid short-term moves, small gain moves that cost money, and it's just like a waste of space and resource. I'm not into that. I'm way over that by now, having watched that around this place over the last 3 or 4 years. But anyway, Bloom was brought here for a reason. His front office skill set matches all that Bill DeWitt has believed in during his baseball life. And that goes back to the days where a very young Bill DeWitt Jr. would accompany his father, who was the general manager and later the owner of the Reds. His father would go on scouting trips. Bill DeWitt would go on the road with other scouts. He would take notes. He actually developed a kind of a very early, very crude database that all the scouts of the Reds would use. When they came back from their trips, they'd file their reports, and then there'd be a big database for everyone to tap into to get instant information. So here was Bill DeWitt out there, helping out the scouts and also creating something that would be able to speed up how they get information, how they share information, how they find information. That's Bill DeWitt going way back early in his life. He's always had that in him. And I don't think we should ever forget what Bill DeWitt did later in life, soon after the turn of this century, to put the Cardinals on a different track and also to put them in position for long-term success. And yes, they had long-term success. DeWitt's biggest and boldest move, as we know, was hiring Jeff Luhnow out of the corporate world to lead the Cardinals into an era of modernization and cutting-edge stuff that they simply had started to fall way behind. Well, actually, I don't say they were way behind, but there were a couple teams like the Oakland A's, for example, who were really starting to stretch it into the future with the way they evaluated talent, the way they accumulate talent, the way they scouted talent, all that stuff. Also some stuff within the competition that would give them an edge. And Bill DeWitt was intrigued by that, and he wanted to do the same for the Cardinals, except he wanted to go even bigger and bolder. And that's what he did by bringing in Jeff Luhnow. And see, this is why now that Bloom is in place, this is why I think it's a good time to go back and just remind myself and everyone else about what DeWitt did when he brought Jeff Luhnow in to the Cardinals operation and the profound impact that it made. Listen, I'm going to probably fuss here. You're going to get mad at me. That's all right. But I got to say what I got to say. If you're one of the folks who think the word analytics is something evil and dirty and filthy and has done great damage the state of baseball, if not ruined the state of baseball, well, I can't join you on that. I like a good hot take. I tend to get overly dramatic, so I'm not opposed to that, but I'm going to save it for stuff that actually has some substance, not this thing acting like analytics is the end of the world, is the work of the devil, and everything is going to die. Baseball will die. I mean, this hysteria and paranoia is just bizarre. I like oldies music. That's why, you can't see it. And recently got a Brian Wilson hat. Bought that before he died. The brilliant composer and songwriter of the Beach Boys, and one of my musical idols. I love oldies music, but you know what? I love oldies music because I'm 66 years old and it's music that I grew up with. But if you saw what's in my various playlists, there'd be a lot of other stuff too, because I recognize that things evolve, things change. Music from the 60s isn't the same as music now. And that doesn't mean that because I came from a certain decade and that was the music I was raised on, it doesn't mean that the music that's out there now stinks because it's something I didn't grow up with. Just like people that grew up with a certain style of baseball that doesn't exist all that much anymore. And so they just resent the fact, all this new stuff, all this fancy pants stuff, they're ruining the game. The one thing I can say about I am 66. I like to make fun of myself. I am an old fart. I'm proud of it, but I'm also proud of the fact that I'm young at heart and I'm not afraid of what's new. Right now, if you want to be, you can, but just don't be running around like Chicken Little. The sky is falling, baseball's dying, and all this nonsense. It just gets so old. Listen, I'm sorry. I just had to lay it out there straight. And just because I like Beatles songs and the Stones and the Beach Boys and Led Zeppelin and whatever, it doesn't mean that I will never try something new or enjoy something new or even say that something new is better than it was back in the olden days. I love the past. Here's the difference between me and some of you, I think. I love the past. I sincerely love the past. But I do not live in the past. I am not a prisoner of the past. I love old-time baseball. But I also recognize that baseball has evolved not just over the last 20, 25 years. It has evolved over and over and over again through the decades. This time, well, that's the other funny thing. We talk about analytics as if it just started. It's been around a long time. People just didn't call it that. Anyway, I am sorry I had to vent, but I am perpetually confused by people who are against using the latest, newest, most modern, most effective information, the most innovative information to gain, to see their team gain a winning edge as a team and to become a better team, and information that can help make your players hit better and pitch better, unless they're so bad it doesn't matter. I just don't understand why people are opposed to information. That's all analytics are. It's information. And if you use it properly and apply it properly, you can become a better team because of it. And you can also win a lot of games, even with a much smaller payroll. Cleveland Guardians, anyone? Tampa Bay Rays, anyone? People I like Cardinals fans who sneer at the Chaim Bloom background in Tampa Bay. The fact that that team's been like bottom 5 payroll forever, yet they outperform much wealthier teams. I don't see any World Series trophies down there in Tampa. No, I think it's kind of hard to do when you have like the 30th ranked payroll every year or 28th or what, I think in the postseason it does matter. But these fellas are trying to compete in the American League East. And I'll use a stat that, again, most people still won't accept or whatever. Since 2008, Tampa Bay Rays have been in many World Series as the Cardinals and the New York Yankees with pocket change payroll size. I'm impressed by that. I don't know why any rational person wouldn't be impressed by that. Anyway, some parts of baseball, I admit for sure, were more entertaining in the old days. I do miss really good starting pitchers winning every game, like Bob Gibson, Jim Palmer, Tom Seaver, Juan Marichal, so many others. Went into every game. Don Drysdale. I'm just throwing names out there, but you pick out your own guy from the 60s and use him as an example. These dudes went in every game, looking to pitch a shutout and certainly looking to go 9 innings. And they didn't always do it, but man, they thought it was their job to build up innings, or I should say supply a lot of innings and help their team and, push through some tough times during games. I love that. I love the era of the ace, the true ace, not the fake aces, the true aces. That's an example of one thing. Yeah, I kind of miss that. I wish it was still like that. But I'm also someone who learned at a young age that it's not always going to stay the same. And there, me sitting, by the side of the road, like screaming at cars or whatever, out of frustration, that's kind of a waste of time. Why did I say screaming at cars? I don't know where that came from. Sitting in the back porch, our back deck howling because I don't like the fact pitchers go 5 innings and they basically want to, take a bow. See, I'm your ace. No, I don't like that. But the game's changed because the game always changes and there isn't a damn thing I can do about it. And I'm not going to love baseball any less than I do. But I'm just acknowledging to you, yeah, there's stuff about the olden days that I thought were outstanding, and I wish that kind of standard was still in place. But when you have pitchers throwing 100 miles an hour all the time, and you got ever since they were a certain age, you got people telling them, no, you no, how many pitches have you thrown? 30. Oh, that's it. It's just a philosophical change. But the stupid thing is, pitchers continue to break down all the time. So by limiting their innings, I mean, I know there's got to be studies out there. I just haven't read them about how this has limited injuries. Maybe it has. And if I'm wrong about that, and I usually like to do my research, but I didn't in this case. So if I'm wrong, I apologize to you. But my sentiment is correct. But I'm also someone who learned at a very young age that there's room in the game for advanced thinking, room for original ideas, room for ideas that go against the grain, room for ideas that, or men, or executives or managers, whomever, who have a willingness and they're unabashedly willing to break from the standard way of doing things to adapt and adjust to a better way of doing things. And they don't sit there and saying, well, as you know, you're not supposed to use your closer unless you have a save situation. And you never use your closer in a save situation. No, I should take back that. See, I'm messing it up. You never use your closer on the road in a tie game. That was Matheny's explanation for using an injured Michael Wacha instead of Trevor Rosenthal in the final game of the 2014 NLCS. Everybody knows you don't use the closer on the road in a tie game. In other words, you're saving him until you get a lead. And I remember talking to Mike Matheny. He was mad at me that I pressed him on the question. And I said, Mike, with all due respect, I know why you were saving Trevor Rosenthal. But if you lost this game, your season is over. This is not like a May 18th game against the Pirates, okay? I didn't say that to him, but I was making the point because he was getting very steamed. He thought it was ludicrous that someone actually challenged this notion that it's better to put Michael with your season on the line in a tie game. If you lose, you're done. That somehow the move there is to bring in a rusty Michael Wacha who was hurt most of the year and hadn't pitched in 20 some days with your season on the line. And meanwhile, your best reliever, those 3 games in San Francisco, the Cardinals lost them all. Trevor Rosenthal never appeared in a game because, again, well, everybody knows you never use your closer in a tie game on the road. And the idea that I just thought that was ludicrous, it really, really ticked Matheny off. What can I say? Anyway, I like people that they're willing to be bold and a little courageous and break from the standard way. Well, that's the way we've always done things. What am I going to show everyone how smart I am by doing it differently? Yeah, if it's going to help your team win, I would say, yeah, absolutely. Listen, some of you probably tired of hearing this, but my managerial idol was Earl Weaver, native St. Louis and Beaumont High School. He used analytics before anyone called him analytics, and his system built a powerhouse in Baltimore. He had people scratching their heads, baseball traditionalist, my father, the young Bernie as well. Like, well, why is he doing that? You know, that kind of stuff. Oh, I found out pretty early why he did things. And one of the real joys of my life as, once I became a media person was talking to Earl Weaver and listening to him in his office before and after games. I was just a young punk. I had no real responsibility, but I just wanted to hear the great man speak. And I learned some stuff. And then later on, after he retired, I had several occasions to sit down with him and talk baseball and talk about his St. Louis years and all that stuff. But anyway, people at times, especially early on, say, why is Earl Weaver doing that? Why did they just promote this hitter from AAA who's hitting 219? What does he want with him? Well, the kid's name was Glenn Gulliver, and he didn't hit for average, but he walked all the time. And Earl Weaver loved the walk, and he cared much more about the walk than the batting average. The on-base percentage was everything to him, much more than batting average. He loved the walks because he believed it tired the pitcher out. He also put pressure on the pitcher because if he's walking people, that's the harder he's working, and the more vulnerable he becomes and more danger he becomes. He loved walks. Anyway, so we would sometimes wonder until we really got to know him, the methods. We thought, man, he's a little different, isn't he? He's funny. Look at him argue with the umpires. Man, look at that guy. He's a rooster just walking around all furious all the time. I mean, Earl Weaver used defensive overshifts before there were overshifts. Whitey Herzog, by the way, did the same. Earl cared a lot more about his hitters drawing walks and hitting for batting average. He also believed you don't waste one of your outs on bunts. You know, you only get 27 of them. You better protect them. You know, he just wasn't going to sacrifice bunts because the old school book says you got to bunt to run her over. No, Earl, no. He had no use for that. Although I must say, he actually bunted a little more than he wants people to remember. God rest his soul. But it was not a big part of what they did. Earl also put together amazingly successful platoons where sometimes on the surface it didn't make sense. They'd find a AAA player or whatever, or someone that had reached the end of the line with another team, and Earl would say, we got to go get him. We need a left-handed bat in left field. And the general manager would say, well, we have a left fielder who hits pretty good. What do we – well, but that guy can't hit right-handed pitching really well. We bring in this left-handed hitting outfielder, and we just use him against right-handed pitching. We're going to get maximum production out of left field. I mean, it's simple if you think about it, but a lot of teams didn't really want to do that back then. So the Orioles, he would get the Orioles as an advantage in matchups against right-handed pitchers and left-handed pitchers because he made a heavy usage of platoons. He also brought in players that thrived in Baltimore because their former teams really didn't know what they had in them and didn't know how to use them properly to get the best out of them. But Earl, in his statistical studies and his research, he found ways to make those same players better. You know why? Because he knew exactly when they should be used and how they should be used. Earl's famous motto of pitching, defense, and 3-run homers, it sounds cute, it sounds simple, it sounds basic. What's so special about that? I agree with you, but I do love the motto because I grew up with it, pitching, defense, and 3-run homers. But it really went much deeper than that. It was a philosophy that he stuck to for all those years. He cultivated it and refined the talent, made his belief system work, made his belief system convert into many, many, many victories for many, many, many years. And so if people say, well, what is he doing? I would say that it seems to me he's doing everything right. Here's the stat for you I looked up today, and I think it's pretty amazing. From the time the Orioles promoted Earl Weaver to the manager's job at the All-Star break in 1968, and until he retired after the 1982 season. He did come back later, but I'm cutting it off at 1982. He should have never come back for 2 years. Anyway, from the All-Star break in 68 until he retired after the 1982 season, the Orioles had I just laugh at this. They had a 596 winning percentage. It was the best in Major League Baseball over those 14 and a half seasons. It wasn't just the best record. Listen to this. I mean, they had a 596 winning percentage. It was 28% better than the next team, the next best team, Cincinnati. It was 44% higher than the next best American League team over all those years. That would be the Yankees. Weaver, a proud St. Louis native and a really good minor league player for the Cardinals who never got a shot at the big leagues. In the more modern era, he would have been a major league player. He was a really good shortstop, and he was actually, for a little guy or whatever, he was really good offensively. But he was always blocked. Anyway, to the benefit of the team I grew up with, Earl Weaver, proud of his longtime affiliation with the St. Louis Cardinals, he brought much of the Cardinal way to Baltimore, and he brought a lot of Cardinals employees with him to Baltimore, including a couple of scouts that were immense help to him in Baltimore. But what he did, he took the Cardinal way to Baltimore, but he added his own touches and improved on it. And then he had his own way, the Earl Weaver way. Now, I don't have to tell anyone in St. Louis about Whitey Herzog and what he did for St. Louis baseball in the 1980s. He not only changed the fortunes of a franchise that struggled in the 1970s, but Whitey changed the way major league teams played the game. He changed the entire industry outlook. They saw these speedy teams in St. Louis, and these guys who can run and get to any ball hit in the air or close all kinds of ground, that hole between shortstop and third base, and turn automatic singles, as it seemed, turn those singles into outs. And like, wow, how did he get to that ball? So all of a sudden, teams are looking for fast players who can run, whether it be stealing bases or maybe play better defense. So what Whitey did in St. Louis set off a spree of aggressive base running and stolen bases and putting pressure on a defense. Other teams tried to emulate the Herzog style, but they could not beat Whitey at his own game, except for those couple of those years in the 80s where their offense just was bad. I mean, just with everything, the Whitey ball thing had to be really precise and really well synchronized. And if a few players were off and it was a bad year or whatever, the whole thing would just kind of like, boom, So there are a couple years like that in the 80s. But man, what a decade. The Cardinals couldn't win by hitting a lot of home runs, so the innovative Herzog found another way that went completely against the way baseball was being played at the time. And Herzog, like Weaver, believed strongly in defense. He was just as smart as Earl Weaver, if not smarter, in creating those platoon split advantages and also seeing hidden gems that he could use in roles on his team, and they would do a great job even though they were not star players, right? Earl was a maverick. Whitey was a maverick. Both men were hugely successful managers who lived forever in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So the reason I told you all about that, it explains why I'm so adamant about quit bitching about analytics, because in one form or another, it's been in place a long, long time. And for me to explain why I feel so strongly about this, I thought it was important to tell you my background and the influence of watching two incredible managers, the way they put things together and the philosophies they had and the way they ran things and the advantages they could find that others couldn't find. So yeah, I just simply don't have a stomach for, well, I got a stomach for good eating. I don't have a stomach for all this constant whining about analytics. I'm not resistant to change. I'm enthusiastic about change if it's smart, and when a front office or manager discovers some advanced or enhanced method of assembling a roster or playing the game in a different way that would give their team an edge. Why? Who in the hell would be opposed to that? I have no fear of innovation. I love innovation. I have no addiction to old school baseball because the most fun I ever had watching baseball played were teams managed by Earl Weaver and Whitey Herzog, who were independent thinkers with new ideas that outsmarted the old school clubs and remained stuck in a time warp. And even though some of the stuff they did was different for the time, and at first people maybe didn't understand it, do you think Whitey Herzog or Earl Weaver gave a damn about what other people thought on the outside? The answer would be no, except they would use much saltier language. Believe me. These two Maverick managers combine a fun style with sweeping success, and that seemed like a hell of a good time for me, and it was a hell of a good idea to me as well. So, and the third baseball experience that goes on my top 3 list of my career, actually my life, was watching Bill DeWitt's Cardinals put so many legendary teams on the field with big stars, future Hall of Famers, one of the great managers ever in his own right, Tony La Russa. In that period between 2000 and through the end of the 2022 season, because the end of the 2022 season was the end of that era. And I have great appreciation for Bill DeWitt's visionary hiring of Jeff Luhnow and the impact that hiring had on a great era of Cardinals baseball. An era was just brilliant, and it was a brilliant era. It was a star-studded era. I covered it all the way through, and it remains one of the most, I feel like I am privileged as one of the most incredible things I had the privilege of covering and writing about and talking about for so long. So that's why Bill DeWitt went back to his past, but he didn't go back to his past in a kind of a pathetic way. No. Bill DeWitt wanted to go back because he knew there was a way to get this thing back up to speed where it should be by repairing the stuff that's been broken along the way, the analytics, the teaching, the instruction, the technology, facilities. I mean, everything, right? Finding value for the money, getting really good players at a low cost because there's value in these kind of players. And a lot of teams don't see what you see or know about these players. So that's why DeWitt said, we can do this again because the Luhnow effect was amazing. And by the way, Bill DeWitt made that decision. It's not like Luhnow showed up one day and say, "Hi, I'm Jeff Luhnow. I want to work for you, and I want to put in new computers and technology, and I have an analytics program that I think is really advanced and better than anybody else. So I'm Jeff Luhnow, so I'm just going to start work now." No, Bill DeWitt specifically recruited him for that reason, because that's what Bill DeWitt wanted. He saw the way things were starting to change. He didn't want to be the Cardinals left behind. He wanted them on the first wave. Unfortunately, he let that lapse and didn't stay on top of the industry standards, and that's why the Cardinals have not made the playoffs for the last 3 years, and things have sort of been stalling out. I don't have to tell you. So that's why he recruited Chaim Bloom to come to St. Louis to remodernize the Cardinals, update the Cardinals, add more elements that can make the Cardinals a success. And also, he's already done it, Chaim Bloom. He's making the Cardinals smarter in everything they do. I mean, that's just the start. He will make them smarter in everything they do. When I return for my second segment of the Bernie Show, I'll explain how the hiring of Luhnow and the implementation of the analytics-based system made the Cardinals such a powerful entity over 23 seasons. But I think might get to that more in the third segment. Got something else to talk about in the second segment. The Cardinals have not been in the playoffs for 3 years, and I hate, I don't mean to be sarcastic. I hate to break it to you, but does anyone really think this is like something unique? Like this doesn't happen pretty much everywhere else? It's another thing I just don't understand. But anyway, first, some exciting news about DraftKings Sportsbook. Missouri, get ready. The wait is almost over. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is coming soon to the Show Me State, which then will become the Show Me the Money State. And you can sign up today. That's right. Do it today. That way you're all organized for December 1st when it's go time. The DraftKings Sportsbook will open for business here in the state of Missouri, with Missouri residents can do whatever they want with that DraftKings Sportsbook app. So if you download now and you place, you'll be able to place a $5 bet when DraftKings Sportsbook goes live. So it's, in other words, get organized ahead of time so you're not scrambling on December the 1st. DraftKings Sportsbook brings everything you need to elevate your game day, including live in-game betting, lightning fast payouts, and endless ways to get in on the action. All right from your phone. And when we officially go live in Missouri, you'll be betting with the Sportsbook app trusted by millions across our land. Safe and secure, fast money withdrawals, and other stuff too. It's just such a great app. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code STL Sports to grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet when we go live on December 1st. That's code STL Sports in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or over, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Excludes customers who redeem pre-launch sign-up offer. You can find the terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. All right, welcome back to segment number 2 of the Bernie Show. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can do with one click. And while you're there, hit that like button as well. And please leave your comments. Give me hell. That's fine, man. All right, back to Bill DeWitt and Chaim Bloom and a little bit of historical perspective, if you don't mind. I simply and respectfully say I cannot agree with the people who take the last 3 seasons of Cardinals baseball, missing the postseason 3 years in a row, ranking 22nd over the 3 years, 22nd among 30 teams in winning percentage. But I can't ride with the people who use that to define Bill DeWitt when his full 30 years as the team's owner is packed with a remarkable amount of success that is just about the envy, or it's an envy of just about, I wouldn't say every other team, but most of those teams. The Cardinals were the standard, and a lot of teams out there, especially the teams that were not in big markets, really envied what Bill DeWitt put together here. So to me, that defines him, not the last 3 years. Somebody's owned a team for 30 years, and we could say that this is the worst it's been over 30 years, and it's 3 years. It's not 10 years. It's not 20 years. It's 3 years. And some people say, well, you're not including the playoffs. They stopped winning in the playoffs. Oh, I know that, but they were making the playoffs. Like I'm saying, of the 30 seasons, the last 3 have been, to me, the slowest and the most frustrating, because we weren't even making the playoffs. And sarcasm alert. I don't think it's possible to win postseason games if you don't make the old playoffs. I think you got to make it first. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, but those of you, all due respect, or maybe I'm not being respectful, but I just don't understand how you choose to define Bill DeWitt over the last 3 years rather than the entire 30 years as one gigantic body of work. It makes no sense to me. And I think it's also really unfair. It's illogical, among other things. The last 3 seasons have been frustrating and dull and forgettable, and this rut could have been avoided, which I've written about Bill DeWitt. I don't know how many, 2,500 times. I've talked about it 2,500 times over the last 3 years. It's not like I haven't addressed it, but I'm tired of talking about it because that part's over, because he went out and hired someone to change this. At least he waited too long, but at least Bill DeWitt's making the effort to restore the Cardinals to their previous level of success. And that's good. To me, that's a positive. So I'm gonna focus on that rather than trying to relitigate the last 3 years. They were lost seasons of baseball, okay? It happens. But the success happened, and there was a lot more success and failure. It's not even a conversation. So I just can't be among those who think, well, the only thing that matters is the last 3 seasons. They're crummy seasons, Bernie. I know. I said so and wrote it and yapped about it myself many times. I do think, and I've said this before, and I don't know why people are insulted by it, because it's true. I think we've lost some perspective here, and I'll explain why. From 2000 through 2022, the unofficial end of the era, the Cardinals competed in the postseason 16 times. That was more than any team in the National League, and it was second in the majors only to the Yankees. And the Yankees made it 18 times, to the Cardinals 16 times. You tell me who played in the huge market with the huge revenue flow. It ain't here in the eastern Missouri. I think it's in the Bronx, right? The Cardinals from 2000 through 22 won 69 postseason games, with only the Yankees in baseball having won more over that time with 83 wins. From 2000 through 2022, the Cardinals competed in 140 postseason games, most in the National League, second to the Yankees, who had 161 postseason games. Over the 23 seasons, the Cardinals fans were treated to 66 postseason home games, most in the National League, and second overall to the Yankees, who had 81 home games. Cardinals fans enjoyed 39 postseason wins at home. Only the Yankees had more home postseason victories over the 23 seasons. This was not only a great time, but this great time for baseball in St. Louis lasted a long time. So what do I hear? But 23, 24, 25. But 23, 24, 25. Yeah, they screwed up, DeWitt and Mosaic. They let this era fizzle out, and it didn't have to be this way. We all know that. But here's the question, and this is going to be the part that might rub some of you the wrong way. I'm not trying to do it, but I do believe in the value of having some historical perspective. So in St. Louis, why do so many people act like this is the only time a great team has gone bad and has faded out and kind of disappears from the postseason stage for a while? Do you think this is unique to St. Louis? Do you think that we're so special and this thing should be perfect all the time, or it should be great all the time without interruption? That's just not realistic. You can feel that way, but it ain't realistic. So therefore, I can't join you with that sentiment. We do, but I don't know why we seem to think that no other fan bases go through what Cardinals fans have experienced as of late. Don't deny it. You know, it's true. And in many, many cases, fans in other places who support their teams very well have endured much longer droughts, much more frustrating droughts than the Cardinals are enduring over the last 3 years. Can I give you some examples? Thank you, because I'm going to. Remember the Blue Jays team who won back-to-back World Series in the early 90s? They, right after winning 2 World Series in a row, they failed to make the postseason for the next 20 years. 20 consecutive years. Not 3 years, 20 years. The Orioles that I grew up with won the World Series in 1983. Then they missed making the playoffs in 26 of the next 28 seasons. Have we gone through anything like that in St. Louis? I'm talking about modern times. The answer would be, what, are you crazy? Of course not. Yeah, that's my point. Under the great Bruce Bochy, their manager, the Giants won 3 World Series from 2010 through 2014. They missed out on the playoffs 8 times in the next 11 seasons. The Yankees made the World Series and lost it in 1981, and then they staggered through 13 consecutive seasons without appearing in a single postseason. Missed the playoffs 13 years in a row. And we want, we want Bill DeWitt to sell the team because they've missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. I mean, I know this country's filled with anger and grievance and everyone's a victim, but I just think in St. Louis we have better sense than that. I really do. So I just don't know, why there's been such hysterical. It is an overreaction, but it's been blown out of proportion. But again, I'm going by this man's 30-year track record, the whole body of work. What about Atlanta? After the Bobby Cox era dynasty slowed and faded, some of their stars got old, and, it was the end of an era. I mean, these cycles come to an end, just like they came to an end in St. Louis. But after that thing just kind of faded, the Braves went through a stretch where they qualified for the postseason 3 times over 12 years. That hasn't happened here in St. Louis. That didn't happen with the Yankees missing the playoffs 13 years in a row, or Bochy's team missing the playoffs 8 times in the next 11 seasons. That hasn't happened here. It hasn't. That's a fact. I'm talking about during the DeWitt era. That great Phillies team, it's one of the great games I ever witnessed live and wrote about. That great Phillies team that lost to Chris Carpenter and the Cardinals of the winner-take-all Game 5 of the 2011 Division Series. After that, the Phillies slipped into a funk, and they did not make the playoffs from 2012 through 21, that's 10 consecutive years of missing the playoffs, and they had 7 losing seasons over that time. In the Bill DeWitt era, and by the way, who do you think's got more money to work with? Who's got more revenue? And the Phillies always drawing big crowds. Phillies much big money bag than the St. Louis Cardinals. Have you seen a DeWitt team fail to make the playoffs 10 years in a row and have 7 losing seasons in a 10-year stretch? No, it's never happened. The Tigers won the World Series in 1984. They didn't make it back until they lost to the Cardinals in the 2006 World Series. In between the 2 World Series appearances, the Tigers made the playoffs one time, uno, in 21 seasons. Did that happen to the Cardinals in between World Series appearances with Bill DeWitt as the owner? Nope. Not even close. What's happened in St. Louis is unfortunate, but it sure as hell could have been worse because it just gave you examples of that. This is a very special baseball town, but no baseball town, even a special one like this, is immune to periods of, an era comes to an end, it gets stinky for a while, and you got to build it back up, and then you start winning again. It's the cycle of baseball. No team is immune to this. Because it often happens when, a team reaches the end or gets near the end of a fantastic era of success, just as it happened with the Cardinals after the 2022 season. And I've said this before, they should have started rebuilding after that disaster in 2023 because they'd already be 2 years into it. But anyway, seriously, and I'm being sincere about this, but this is something that's on my mind because I think of all these other towns where they've had great baseball teams that all of a sudden can't win for a decade. And we are metaphorically speaking, we got people in this town like wanting to jump off the Eads Bridge because the Cardinals missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. Just a loss of perspective. And I think if you're reasonable, I think that I'm speaking the truth here. I just don't know why we seem to think we're different, that we shouldn't have to go through that. We're not different. Oh, actually, there is one difference. The hard times for baseball in St. Louis over the 30 years of Bill DeWitt ownership have been shorter and much lighter than in many, many, many other baseball markets. Now, DeWitt's trying to make it right, and I think that given his 30 years of impressive success, with only limited bouts of losing, and just close your eyes and think about all the players that have been part of the Cardinals during this time, all these great stars that Bill DeWitt and Walt Jocketty, John Mozeliak brought to this market, brought to these fans. Really special. But yeah, sometimes the rain's going to fall. Sometimes it's for like about 3 years. It's going to be pretty gray, pretty dull, not good. Still a hell of a lot better than most places, if not every place, except for like the Yankees, who, they can't win a World Series, but they keep making the playoffs every year. I would hope so, given what they spend. Anyway, when I return from my third and final segment of today's Bernie Show, I'm going to review some of what Chaim Bloom said in his Tuesday media conference that resonated with me because it reminded me of the things that I heard from DeWitt and Luhnow after DeWitt made the shocking move to recruit Jeff Luhnow from outside the baseball world. And I will, I think I've done this before, but I will convey, but I'm going to go in greater detail, the conversation I had with Bill DeWitt after he hired Jeff Luhnow, which left everyone astonished in St. Louis and other places. What is he doing? I'll explain what he told me that they were going to do and why he did it when we return. But first, time for me to do, it's one of my favorite things. I'm a 66-year-old dude, and sometimes I need a little help. There ain't no shame in saying, yeah, I need a little help. So it's time for me to give my fellow gentlemen, whatever age, a little pep talk about BlueChew. BlueChew can help you raise your game for those intimate, pleasurable times, those special times with your partner. And if you're not having enough of those times, you're missing out on one of the more wonderful parts of life. Well, Big Blue can power you up. There's no need for you to hesitate or feel awkward. As we like to say, just chew it and do it, okay? I know what BlueChew has done for me, and like I mentioned, I'm old enough to collect Social Security, and I want you to discover what BlueChew can do for you. This applies to men of all ages. But I'm talking about the older guys because I'm one of them, and I know how it's helped me. So anyway, if you need a stronger bat, BlueChew's in your equipment room, so go get it, and then go get it done. Whatever room in the house you choose to get it done. BlueChew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for enhanced performance. You will get your first month of BlueChew free. You're just a few clicks away, and I'll explain. You sign up at BlueChew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription at your doorstep in a few days. That's it. All done online, simple, private, nothing awkward about it. Try your first month of BlueChew free when you use the promo code Bernie. That's just pay $5 shipping. That's it. That's promo code Bernie to get your first month free, and the only cost to you is the $5 shipping fee. It's pretty good. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank our friends at BlueChew for sponsoring the Bernie Show here on STL Sports Central. Thank you. All right, let's get back to my conversation a long time ago with Bill DeWitt after he hired Jeff Luhnow. I think it was about 22 years ago, something like that. Like a lot of people, I wasn't sure why Bill decided to go that way when things were going pretty well for the Cardinals, but he had his reasons. And, I said, can I just sit down with you and you can talk me through all this and explain everything, and I'll ask you questions to follow up? And he said, sure, let's do that because I want you to understand. So we sat down for 90 minutes. Actually, it might have been even 2 hours. And DeWitt explained his reasons for bringing in Jeff Luhnow from the business world. Here are the few of the most important points made by DeWitt that day. Number one, the Cardinals needed to do a much better job of drafting and developing their own talent because it wasn't realistic to be able to do what Walt Jocketty, to his credit, had been doing, which is to convince other teams to trade to the Cardinals a star player, and also not asking for much in return, because these teams will say, well, the guy's about to become a free agent, so he might as well get a little something. But so it's really easy. And Walt did it, though, to his eternal credit, to get in there and scoop up a Jim Edmonds, right? Or a Larry Walker, or a Mark McGwire, or a Scott Rowland, right? But DeWitt said, hey, the industry's changing, and this isn't just going to last where you can get a Mark McGwire for a couple of, just two or three guys that, whether you have them or not, it doesn't matter. He said the industry is going to changing. There's teams already sort of redoing their front offices, and they're not just going to give away players who are in their walk year. And so the idea that we can continue to do it this way, it's just not realistic. It's just going to become passé. And if you think about it, trades made, now or since that time, yeah, you do see some teams paying a fortune for, certain players, but it just doesn't happen with the frequency that was happening at that time. So DeWitt said that day, and he said, listen, what I think is going to happen, you got some of the new people in the front office, and they're going to work in advance, and I think they're going to try to hold on to the stars by signing them to earlier contract extensions. And for the most part, Bill DeWitt was right about that. They're not giving away walk year free agents who are really good. They're just not doing it anymore. So Bill DeWitt was 100% right about that. So you're going to have to find another way to fill your roster. Number two, Bill DeWitt told me that the goal was much improved payroll efficiency. And I can hear the sounds of some of your voices. Yeah, because he's cheap, Bernie. No, he's actually smart. The team could save money and payroll space by filling a significant percentage of the big league roster, like a good share of the roster, with homegrown talent that comes to the major leagues. And when they graduate to the majors, you have them under cost control for 6 seasons. And if you have enough of those homegrown players playing at low salaries and they can play and they can help you, well, then that gives you more money to work with and more flexibility to acquire more expensive talent through trades or free agency. DeWitt was 100% right about that. The Cardinals had all sorts of drafted and developed players step up on those good teams. This is just a very short list. But I'm talking about Matt Carpenter, Alan Craig, John Jay, Skip Schumacher, Colton Wong. And seriously, there's many more than that. And because they were starting to build up their roster with more homegrown players, the Cardinals could go out and make a trade for Matt Holliday and know that in addition, they got him at a good price from the A's, but in addition to that, they had the money to sign him to the contract that they eventually signed him to because they had kept payroll space open by putting cheaper but effective homegrown players on the roster, more of them. He said, we need a flow. And it's funny because Chaim Bloom mentioned that word yesterday. We need a steady flow of homegrown players that can help us every year. And I can't think of one sane human being who would disagree with that premise. And DeWitt was right. And the Cardinals had a lot of their own young players step through and fill, really important roster spots or roles. And that gave the front office and the owner more to work with when they had a big target in mind. Number 3, Bill DeWitt told me that he was particularly worried about the importance of drafting and developing your own pitching, especially the starters. Does that sound familiar? I wonder why he would think that. No, he believed correctly that it's going to be really, really, really expensive to go outside the organization to find good starters who would become, it would be a lot more expensive to fill in your rotation that way. And then he pointed out, and it's even worse now. Remember him pointing out, he says, and the other thing, I don't mind spending a lot of money on a pitcher. And he said, look at the contract we gave to Chris Carpenter to keep him around. And, we did that with Waino. And he mentioned some other examples. He said, but pitchers break down and get hurt. So you're paying a lot of money. And if it's a long-term contract, they may not be able to pitch for a year and a half or close to 2 years, or they're going to get hurt more than once. That's all true. In other words, he's saying you got to be careful about putting a big bulk of your payroll into starting pitching when you go get them on the outside, because pitchers break down and you're not getting what you're paying for. And he was right about that. The injury risk is always there. It's always treacherous. So why not develop your own? That's a better way to do it, as long as they're good pitchers. And that way, if they break down, you don't want to see that. But the point is, you have more guys to plug in because you've done a great job of developing pitching. And if you do, unfortunately, lose one of your relievers or one of your good starters to injury, and I don't mean this to sound cold, because I always hate when these guys get hurt, but the pitcher that you lose to Tommy John surgery, who's in like his second year, is making $500,000 or whatever. But if you had just signed that guy, it's a big free agent deal, and he blows out the Tommy John ligament. Well, that's a guy that's making $22 million that year, and that's gone. You're not getting any pitching out of it. All right. So with Luhnow, he also said with Luhnow, he's going to coordinate, he's going to redo the way we scout and draft, because he's got a great system that he's devised that's going to kind of different way of scouting players and identifying traits that make them a good draft pick or that make them appealing to you. It's a different kind of model for assessing talent. And that way you're going to find some good surprises. There's no foolproof method of this, but Luhnow had a lot more information and different ways of having the real scouts look at pitchers or look at hitters where they sort of had an advantage on some other teams. That's why the Cardinals twice over a short period of time were named like the number one farm system in baseball by Baseball America, because Luhnow and the scouts that he sent out there after telling them, here's what we're looking for, and we'll run it through our model. They were filling up the spots in the minor leagues with people that were on their way to the majors. And even after Luhnow left to become the general manager of the Astros in 2011, his scouting, drafting, developing model stayed in place, and it still worked until it didn't. And the Cardinals, John Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt, and they admit it, they let the thing become outdated. They assumed it would always work. We're good. No, you weren't. You fell behind. And you lost a lot a lot of good, young, cost-controlled pitching. Here are some of the names of pitchers who were coming through during those times, right? Lance Lynn, Michael Wacha, Shelby Miller, Jack Flaherty, Joe Kelly, Jaime Garcia, Carlos Martinez, Jason Mott, Trevor Rosenthal, Seth Maness, Kevin Segrist, so many more. Number 4, Bill DeWitt believed that another key to effective roster construction would be you don't have to go out there and, sign some guy making $6 or $7 million, because there's people out there that you can get for less who are just as good. You just got to be, smart enough, have a sharp enough eye and the information with the help of analytics that tell you, well, this guy, you pay him $2 million and he's probably better than a guy that wants $6 million. Well, what kind of fool would want to sign the guy to $6 million if the guy you sign for $2 million is just as good, if not better? What kind of idiot would want to do that? I've joked about that too sometimes. All the people say, oh, you got to spend more. You got to do. Oh, so in other words, if I'm looking for a new washer dryer set, I can get the same one at one place, let's say for $700, right? But I find it the exact same thing at another place for $450. Now, why in the hell would I pick the one that costs $700? Are there any brain cells that go into that kind of logic? Well, the $700 one must be better. It's the same one. Go for the value cost. Anyway, Bill DeWitt was right about that too. The Cardinals, there's such a long list of guys, guys that the Cardinals came up with that were just kind of waiting to be scooped up. And, getting back to one other thing, because I don't know that I mentioned the names when talking about some of the homegrown players, position players that came through during that time that not only took up roster spots at low salaries, but also were really good. And, if you go through the list, and there were a lot of them, but I don't know if I mentioned this or not, and I apologize if I already did, but I just want to make sure I didn't forget. Matt Carpenter, Alan Craig, John Jay, Skip Schumacher, Colton Wong, and there were more, and a bunch of pitchers that I already talked to you about. So anyway, I wanted to backtrack there for a second. Sorry about that. So Bill DeWitt thought, listen, there are guys out there you can sign for $2 million rather than paying $5 million. So we'd be stupid to just look at the $5 million players when the $2 million players are just as good. In a lot of cases, they're better. They were able to do that a lot. I mean, David Eckstein. You said, well, wait a minute. He was a World Series MVP. Yeah, he was. He didn't sign some big deal with the Cardinals. The way the Angels waived him, basically. Ryan Ludwig, So Taguchi, Ryan Franklin, Edward Mujica, Pat Neshek, John Lackey, David Freese. I mean, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. DeWitt was right about that. So anyway, by the time my sit down with DeWitt ended, I had a much better understanding about the Luhnow hiring and what it did for the Cardinals. And I didn't even mention that Luhnow brought analytics to the Cardinals, and he had people working for him that eventually were so good at this and so ahead of their times that they were recruited by other front offices around Major League Baseball, because the brain power that Jeff Luhnow brought into the situation, the brain power was formidable. And the analytics that these people devised helped the Cardinals get an advantage and win games because they were making use of analytics, smart use of analytics, at a time where only 2 or 3 teams were even dabbling in it. Analytics can be your friend, my friends. Analytics are not the enemy. Or maybe you didn't like that period between 2000 and 2022 where the Cardinals were one of the top 3 teams in baseball. Yeah, I guess you didn't like that. That's some damn analytics. I can't enjoy it. That's why listening to Chaim Bloom yesterday, which would be Tuesday, some of what he said hit home for me, because he emphasized some of the principles that made the Cardinals so great for 20-plus seasons. And he talked about some stuff that sounded familiar, and they did sound familiar because I had many hours of conversations with Bill DeWitt about what was important and what they had to do, and what they had to sustain it, which they did for a long time until the end. But a lot of the themes that Chaim Bloom spoke about, man, it sounded familiar, and that was great. That music to my ears, because I'm like, awesome. They're going back to the way they did it to win and win and win and win. And they're going to do it again because they have the right guy in place to help them get there. Chaim Bloom yesterday, he emphasized some of the principles that made the Cardinals so great over 20 plus seasons. Some of what he said, for example, he said the Cardinals have always been at their best a draft and develop organization. And that's something we are absolutely going to do here now when we get started. And they already have started to do that. Draft and develop is the best way to go for the Cardinals. I'm 100% in agreement with that because I've been saying this for several years now. What are they doing? Their farm system and the way they develop players, there's something terribly wrong here. No, but I guess they wanted to extend Miles Michaelis' contract again, right? Or maybe there people in the fan bases wanted to, throw away $15 million on a mediocre starting pitcher who isn't going to make a difference, rather than invest in your farm system, your player development system. Once again, how the hell is that smart? Bloom said, quote, "Who are the Cardinals at our best? To me, it's simple. The organization at its best sets the standard for the rest of baseball." That's exactly what DeWitt did when he hired Luhnow, and Luhnow got to work to do his part of that. DeWitt did that with Luhnow. Bloom wants to do that again. He wants to emulate the past success, and he's capable of doing it. More from Bloom. Quote, "Going back to when Branch Rickey literally invented the farm system, a short walk from where we're sitting here today, to when George Kissel revolutionized how the game was taught, to when Whitey Herzog went all in on a style of play that set the tone for the sport for a decade, and then to when, under the DeWitt family's leadership, this organization, including many people who are here today, changed the way the industry thought about the amateur draft and about how to use information and make baseball decisions. That's our legacy here. That's who we are at our best." Amen to that. Absolutely correct. Bloom stressed the need to evolve and not stay in place. Even if you are successful, you don't assume you got it all figured out. He basically said in so many ways, different ways, the same thing. You have to evolve. You can't, people in the industry are trying to outdo you, and they're going to do everything they can. And you just can't wait to watch them pass you by. You've got to stay in the lead and do everything possible to stay in the lead with your information, your technology, your facilities, your instructors. I mean, everything. Quote from Chaim Bloom, "We set the standard, and that standard is always changing. It means something different in 2025 than it meant in 1925 or 1965 or 2005, and it's going to mean something different in 2035. In other words, Chaim Bloom sees the mistakes the Cardinals made in letting their system and their dominance crumble. And he makes a great point. Even if Chaim Bloom gets the Cardinals back to a really good place, you don't just sit there and say, well, we did it. No, you got to keep going, man. Because baseball front offices are smarter than ever. Look at all the teams with low payrolls are in the playoffs this year. So he's absolutely right about that. And he continued on that train of thought. Quote, "So now we get to do it again. That takes boldness to do things our way, not to fear being different. If we think different means better." Love that. He said, quote, "It takes the humility to understand that when it comes to this great game, there's always so much we don't know, so much to learn, and we can never stand still. We can be good, but we can never be good enough. In this competitive business," Chaim Bloom said, "the front of the line is always moving." I mean, this stuff just it just hit me. I loved it because it's so similar to what Bill DeWitt told me back in the early aughts about why he brought Jeff Luhnow in, right? Bloom's not going to allow the standards that he spoke of. He's not going to allow them to slide under his watch. He's going to raise them. That's his first job, to raise them back up. And then he wants to keep them. He's driven to keep them at the highest level. And that's where the Cardinals went wrong late, after 2022, or leave it a little bit before that. That's where they went wrong. We got all the answers. No, you didn't. See, Chaim Bloom gets it. He has the plan. He will execute the plan. He knows what he's doing. Player development, draft and development is in his wheelhouse. He's never going to stop in his quest to learn more, get more information, more. Anything that can give his organization, his major league team, an edge. He's got a strong desire to give the Cardinals that extra edge in roster building and advanced information and how to develop players, how to give them everything they need to be successful instead of sending them to the major leagues when they're not ready. Chaim Bloom, everyone that I know that knows him says, listen, you're going to get a guy who's going to work harder than anybody in the game. He's absolutely driven to learn and study and research and find different things and come across stuff that so many other teams might be missing. He said, that guy is going to work harder than anyone the Cardinals have ever had. And I said, well, come on. He said, well, okay, maybe tie for first. But Bloom is driven to outwork everyone to find those small edges that can lead to big success. Bloom gets it for sure, which also means something else. Many years after hiring Jeff Luhnow, Bill DeWitt gets it. He still gets it. He understands what the Cardinals need right now, which is why he went out and got Chaim Bloom, because he knows Chaim Bloom can do for the Cardinals now what Jeff Luhnow helped do for the Cardinals back in the early aughts. Bill DeWitt hadn't gone to sleep on you. Cardinals as an organization took a nap there for 3 or 4 years, but you could feel the energy. The energy is back already because of this new leadership. Because the Cardinals are going to go nuts as far as trying to get back this advantage that they had given away. And as Bill DeWitt told me last fall, he said, I like the Chaim Bloom way. I like the way he drafted in Boston. I like the way they drafted and developed in Tampa Bay. But the difference is we also want stars. So if we draft players who become stars, I've always wanted stars. We're not going to let players, all of them, walk away. We're going to make sure we keep enough of them here. And we're going to make sure if we draft and develop and do it the right way, we're going to have really good payroll efficiency. And then we will have money to spend to go out and get what we need to get us over the top. Well, why would you believe that, Bernie? Because he did it before. I guess I have the benefit of the history of being there as he was talking about it and explaining the plan, and then me seeing it executed. That's why I believe him. And I know the guy hates seeing all those empty seats at Busch Stadium. And he's pretty fired up. And to me, this means fired up because he's doing something that was profoundly successful a long time ago. And it's not too late to implement it, but in a more modern way, this time with Chaim Bloom. Some of you want to see him throw stupid money around, which makes no sense whatsoever. There will be a time for spending a lot more money. It ain't the time right now. Let Chaim Bloom get to work to get this model back up to speed, get this thing churning and going and moving forward. And there will be a time, probably sooner than later, well, you are going to go out there and spend a lot more money than you have been. Anyway, I'm sorry I went on for so long. Thanks for watching today. And I'm grateful for your support. And I want to thank our sponsors, DraftKings and BlueChew. And I want everyone to have, a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.